I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk about a story that came out via CNN, which says that the CIA extracted an inside source, a spy inside the Kremlin, over fears that Trump was going to reveal who the spy was. This person that supposedly the CIA extracted has been revealed. He's been living in the U.S. He bought a home. He hasn't been in hiding. He had a pretty low-level position in the Kremlin with no access to Putin, but yet CNN pushed this story. And I think they pushed this story in order to cover up some things, which I think you'll get into. And they do cite a lot of intelligence anonymous sources. Of course, it's no secret that Brennan and Clapper and McCabe actually now as well. They've been connected to CNN, and some of them are on the CNN payroll as contributors. So it wouldn't surprise me if some of these intelligence sources were actually people like Andrew McCabe and Clapper and Brennan. But Alexander, get into this story, which has fallen apart rather quickly. Actually, I even think the CIA has also disputed this story that CNN has pushed. So get into what is a pretty fascinating, what I think a fascinating fake news piece via CNN.
Right, let's start with one of the most obvious fake news part of it, because what CNN says, and it says this on the basis of information it says he got from 5 former US intelligence officials. Well, I'm sure you've named 3 of them: Clapper, McCabe, and Brennan.
Maybe Comey?
I maybe Comey too. I'm not going to guess who the 5th was. But anyway, is that the reason this supposed spy was exfiltrated, as it's called, smuggled out of Russia, supposedly, and brought to the US, was because in early 2017, the US intelligence community was supposedly getting concerned about the fact that Trump blurted out some intelligence information to Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, during a meeting they had in the White House, in the Oval Office. And this made them think this guy Trump can't be trusted to keep secrets. So in order to save our man in the Kremlin, we're going to exfiltrate him and bring him to the United States. Now, can I just say straight away that story is absolute and total nonsense. There was a sort of phony scandal because Trump discussed with Lavrov at a meeting, which did happen in the White House, certain information about ISIS. But no one at the time thought that it was really compromising any US intelligence source. And this attempt to sort of, to smear Trump by implying that he somehow outed this alleged spy is absolute rubbish. In fact, we know who outed the spy, because what seems to have been happening is the US intelligence community, i.e. Brennan, Clapper, Comey, McCabe, and the rest were busy throughout 2016 and early 2017, claiming that they had all this intelligence about Russian interference in the US presidential election. In August 2016, we know that Brennan sent a memo, a secret memo to Obama, saying that we have all of this information. They were attributing it to this spy in the Kremlin, and supposedly the identity of this spy is contained in one of the classified intelligence assessments that was published in January 2017. Now, I said at the time when we first heard about these intelligence assessments that there's really little point in classifying them, because given how Washington leaks like a sieve, the Russians will have a complete copy of this assessment. Putin will certainly have such a copy within days. And I am sure that's what happened. So it was US intelligence itself that basically disclosed the existence of this man. And there then followed an article, which I very well remember, in June 2017, which appeared in the Washington Post, which claimed that this spy was deep inside the Kremlin and had managed to get access to Putin's instructions to help Trump during the election, and that this was the key evidence that supposedly proved Russiagate. And we've heard rumbles about that spy later. There was some talk about him again a few months ago. And now we've had this story from CNN that he was actually exfiltrated. Now, a few things to say. You mentioned that this man was working in the Kremlin. The Russians have made it absolutely clear that they know who he is. He's an individual called Oleg Smolenkov. Oleg Smolenkov is a former Russian diplomat, who was apparently posted to the U.S. embassy, the Russian embassy in Washington, in the late 1990s. He was there as an aide to the then Russian ambassador to the U.S., who is a man called Yuri Ushakov. Yuri Ushakov runs the international department of Russia's presidential administration. The presidential administration, whose international department Yuri Ushakov runs, is not located in the Kremlin. It is located in a building outside the Kremlin, in a place called Staraya Ploshchad. That's Old Square. It seems that Ushakov brought this man with him, this man Smolenkov, with him. So Smolenkov was never working inside the Kremlin. He was working, as I said, from this other building, in Staraya Ploshchad, Old Square in Moscow, which is located about half a mile from the Kremlin. And he was a middle to low ranking official in the international department of the presidential administration. It is most unlikely he would ever have met Putin. If he ever did meet Putin, it would have been pure chance. He certainly would not have had access, direct personal access to these sort of secrets that, people are talking about. And frankly, if he is indeed, or was indeed, the most important US spy within the Russian government, as CNN, the New York Times, various people are claiming, then it confirms a view which I've long had, which is that the United States does not, in fact, have access to much information from within the senior positions of the Russian government. So we're not talking about a very senior official. The Russians found out who he was very quickly. He apparently fled Russia in July 2017. That's about a month after this Washington Post article appeared. He went to Montenegro, and from Montenegro he went to the United States, where he is living perfectly openly and has just bought a house, or last year he bought a house in Virginia for $1 million. So he's done very well for himself financially. He's living safely in the United States. He was not in the Kremlin. He was located outside the Kremlin. He was an aide to a Russian foreign policy official, Yuri Ushakov, and it beggars belief that he had access to any really important secrets within the Kremlin, within Putin's own circle. He would have no doubt had some information about Russian foreign policy generally, because that is Yuri Ushakov's job. And as an aide to Yuri Ushakov, he would have had access to that kind of medium-grade intelligence, but certainly not the kind of very high-grade intelligence which would be implied by him actually capturing Putin's instructions on any one issue. So that's the true story, I think, of this affair.
Yeah, I'm on the Automatic Earth blog, Alexander, and they actually have an interesting fact here that the information that Trump was even accused of divulging to Lavrov and to the Russians was not even a secret either, and it was related to actually an article that CNN first broke, and that Trump kind of mentioned it to Lavrov during his meeting, or divulged this information, which had to do with ISIS having capabilities to put bombs in suitcases, and the Israelis notified the Americans, and Trump was kind of telling the Russians. So it wasn't really that much of a secret that Trump was divulging to begin with.
Alex, can I just say, we wrote about it, the Duran. I think both of us were writing about it at the time. It was one of these fake Russian collusion, Trump, Lavrov collusion stories that the media were whipping up quite a lot at that time. Basically, as we all know, ISIS had a plot to use laptops as bombs inside aeroplanes. This had been widely discussed in the media, including CNN, exactly as you say. It came from intelligence provided by Israel, which had been made public, exactly as you say, and Lavrov and Trump quite openly discussed it during that meeting in the Oval Office with all sorts of senior US officials there. None of them was in any way worried or concerned about this. That was a completely phony story. And this attempt to link Trump with the exfiltration of Smolenkov is just bogus. It's once again CNN and some people within the intelligence community trying to create something out of literally nothing. They got an agenda against Trump, and that was the whole of that story. I mean, it was absolute rubbish at the time. It's rubbish now. And what CNN is also publishing now is rubbish. And as I said, I mean, if you read this latest article, they say they're not going to publish Smolenkov's name because, that would put him in danger. And lo and behold, the Russians say, well, we actually know all about this guy. We found out who he was years ago. I forgot to mention that he was actually sacked from his job with Ushakov. And then, as I said, after a while, he fled to Montenegro. And the Russians have known all along who he was. And it was the Russians who disclosed his name. They said, this man is Oleg Smolenkov. This is what he did. This is where he worked. This is the kind of person he was. They know all about him. The CNN story is absolutely ridiculous from start to finish. The only question is, did Smolenkov provide the US intelligence community, the CIA, with any intelligence that was Russiagate related? And that's another question, again, which I think we can now discuss.
I mean, Alexander, I've pulled up the CNN story from April 1st, 2017. The title, Alexander, says, quote, "First on CNN, new terrorist laptop bombs may evade airport security, intel sources say." First on CNN. So you're telling me that CNN, as they're crafting this news story about extracting a Russian spy a CIA spy in the Kremlin, they didn't know this? So they're proud that they broke this story in 2017.
Of course they know. I mean, CNN it has ceased.
They're forgetting what they're writing.
Well, they're forgetting what they're writing. But I mean, the CNN has stopped, to all intents and purposes, for me, being a news media outlet. What it is it's an anti-Trump outlet. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, let us say it again. One, the story, the sort of fake the fake scandal that was created about the laptop was nonsense when it was made back in 2017. As you correctly said, it was all based on the discussion of a CNN article. And this story trying to link Smolenkov to that sort of fake scandal is just piling on more fake news upon earlier fake news. I mean, there is no reality to it. But as I said, did Smolenkov actually have any Russiagate-related material to offer at all? Or is all that made up? And I'm going to say this, I'm not sure. I mean, it's possible that Smolenkov passed on some gossip. But can I just explain a few things about how the Russian intelligence system works? And what I'm saying is not rocket science. You don't have to be a high-grade intelligence analyst to know this. It's regularly discussed in the Russian media. Putin meets every Tuesday with his intelligence and security chiefs in what is called in Russia the Security Council. He there discusses security and intelligence issues with all the various heads of the intelligence services and with the secretary of the Security Council, who is in overall charge of intelligence, who is a man called Nikolai Patrushev. If Putin were going to give any instruction to the intelligence agencies to do anything, he would have done it there. That is a completely different bureaucracy from the bureaucracy that Smolenkov was involved in. There is no crossover. There's absolutely no crossover at all. It's most unlikely that his boss, Ushakov, would have had knowledge of that kind of operation. And it beggars belief that Smolenkov would have done. Smolenkov may have had other information about Russian foreign policy intentions, but it is inconceivable, to me at least, that he would have had this kind of highly classified information about what was going on between Putin and his intelligence chiefs deep inside the Kremlin, where it's important to say that Smolenkov did not work.
Yeah, they even tried to link it to like Trump's meeting with Putin at Helsinki and all kinds of ridiculous stuff. I mean,
that's equally absurd.
Yeah, it's equally absurd.
Of that.
But the whole thing is CNN is continuing to gin up fake news in order to somehow keep this Trump-Russia collusion thing alive. It's getting very sad and very pathetic. And it's not only CNN, it's a lot of these revolving door intelligence chiefs who are now part of the media and who are also very anti-Trump, these deep state guys that despise Trump. And some of them, like Brennan, like McCabe, most likely Clapper as well, were people that were directly involved in engineering this soft coup against Trump. So, I mean, this is not only is this a pathetic incident, but it's also very dangerous to see this going on, is it not?
Oh, of course it is. And I think actually you've again put your finger on it, because this all looks to me very much like an alibi. I'm going to say that frankly. I mean, I suspect that Smolenkov was was being asked some Russiagate questions. But if you go back through the Russiagate story, you will find that you get all this intelligence in 2016, so-called intelligence. In other words, the Steele dossier, which alleges collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Now, we know that the Steele dossier is completely fake, but we also have now good reason to believe that it's the Steele dossier that gets the whole of Russiagate started. So there's been this constant attempt to create alibis, to try to draw attention away from this discredited dossier and to try to claim that the intelligence came from other sources. So firstly, we had this very, very bizarre story about Papadopoulos supposedly blurting out information to the Australian High Commissioner in a drunk in a bar in London. Now that story has completely collapsed. Nobody, I think, any longer who's followed the Papadopoulos story with any attention and who's listened to Papadopoulos, as we have done, believes that anymore. I mean, that story has failed. So now that that alibi has collapsed, we now see an entirely new alibi appearing, which is of this man, Smolenkov, who supposedly was the key person who was providing all this intelligence to the US intelligence community about the Russians, about Putin himself personally, supposedly working to help Donald Trump elected. I have a fundamental problem with this, and that is this. What we know is that the US intelligence community and the FBI placed various people, various members of the Trump campaign under very intense surveillance, and that they were applying for FISA warrants against at least one of them, who was Carter Page. And we now have a fair amount of information about what went into those FISA warrants. We know that those FISA warrants were largely based on information that was taken from the Steele dossier. We also know that there was some reference to Papadopoulos, but it seems that there was no reference to Smolenkov at all. Now, if Smolenkov's intelligence was so important, why was that the case?
Good point. Why was that the case?
Well, the only explanation I can think of is that it wasn't so important. Exactly. I say that because I assume that the CIA would have shared this information with the FBI. I mean, certainly they would have passed it on to Clapper, and Clapper was Comey's boss when Comey was acting in a counterintelligence operation. So I find it very difficult to believe. I find it, in fact, inconceivable that this information from Smolenkov, if it had really existed, and if it had really been as important as is now being alleged, would not have been passed down to Comey and McCabe and people like Peter Strzok and indeed Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who would, I'm sure, have been considered secure and safe to handle this sort of information. So if it wasn't passed down, it seems to me the only explanation must be that it wasn't that important.
Yeah, it wasn't that important, and I think they had already committed to the Steele dossier. And to go down that track of lies. I mean, they already had formulated pretty much how they wanted to remove Trump. And I think they all the chips were in on the Steele dossier. There was nothing to the other stuff, probably.
Exactly. It's important to say that that Brennan passed on this information to Obama, to President Obama, which allegedly came from Smolenkov, in August 2016, by which time the Steele dossier, which was actually, we know, was actually saying all these same things, had been circulating for several months. So, again, it doesn't really add up to me. I mean, it's possible, and this is, I think, as far as it goes, that the CIA may have said to Smolenkov, who was their spy, look, we're getting all this information from Steele, or from someone like Steele. We're getting all this information that there's all this collusion going on between the Trump campaign and the Russians, and that the Russians are breaking into the DNC computers. We received this report from CrowdStrike, this firm that says as much. Can you confirm that is so? And in that kind of situation, I can well imagine Smolenkov, who it turns out, by the way, there's a very interesting article about him in the New York Times. It turns out that there were some people within the US intelligence community who were doubting that Smolenkov was very reliable. It's possible that Smolenkov at that point, in order to keep on good terms with his bosses in the CIA, said, well, yes, I've heard these stories. I'm sure that's true. And, Putin did indeed give this order. But I come back to what I said. if you actually look at Smolenkov's job within the Russian government, it's extremely unlikely, to say the least, that he would actually have had that kind of information.
Well, of course he said anything that his bosses wanted to hear because they were
Well,
they were so obsessed with removing Trump. How else would Smolenkov have gotten $1 million plus to have purchased a house in Virginia and all that money? Just like Halper got all his millions, and just like Christopher Steele made all his money, and the people that were feeding Christopher Steele those lies in Russia, I'm sure, also got a lot of money from Steele. I mean, Fusion GPS, everybody made out with a lot of cash because everyone was just sick. They were infected with this Trump derangement virus, and the money was flowing. So they were saying, yeah, sure, absolutely, Putin, Trump, yeah, absolutely.
I think that is absolutely right. I mean, I would have taken this intelligence much more seriously if it had come to light in, say, 2015. If Smolenkov had been reporting this kind of information, even then there would have been problems. Even if it had been provided then, there would have been very, very great problems with it, given what we know Smolenkov's job was. But, if he'd said it in 2015, before the Steele dossier was written, before the CrowdStrike report was published, well, then you'd have said, well, maybe there's something there, but, we need to look at it. We need to look at this a little bit more closely. But in August 2016, after the Steele dossier is already circulating, after the CrowdStrike report has already been published, when the entire media is already talking about the fact that it was the Russians who supposedly broke into the DNC computer and computers and provided all the DNC and Podesta emails to WikiLeaks. I mean, by that point, it's exactly what you said. It's what's called confirmation bias. You get somebody to confirm what you already believe. Or what you already want.
And you pay them. And you pay them very well.
And you pay them very well. And there is something else, by the way, because it turns out that Smolenkov didn't want to come to the United States. He was told by the US intelligence community in late 2016, we've blown your cover, because it was they who blew his cover, not, let me stress, Donald Trump. We've blown your cover. You're now in serious danger. Come to the US. We're going to, arrange for you to escape because your life's in danger. And Smolenkov apparently said, I don't want to come. I don't believe any of this. I don't think I'm in any kind of danger. My family don't want me to leave. I want to stay in Russia. And at that point, the US intelligence community, some members of it had already been worried about his reliability. At that point, even more of them began to worry. And I can't help wondering whether Smolenkov didn't want to come to the US because he knew perfectly well that he was telling the Americans all the things they wanted to hear. He didn't really want to come to the US and face them there. So, that may explain why he didn't want to leave Russia. I mean, it argues against his reliability as a source. But can I say again about Smolenkov? His job, what we know about his job, which the Russians have been very forthcoming about, doesn't suggest someone, in fact, all but confirms that he was not someone who would have had access to this kind of very high-grade intelligence. Putin is known to keep his discussions with his very senior officials extremely secret. And all of these people, Patrushev, Bortnikov, all these people who work in the intelligence world, know how to keep secrets. That's what they do. They wouldn't go around blurting it out to someone like Smolenkov, or even to Smolenkov's boss, Ushakov. And it's not even clear where they would even have met him.
More fake news out of CNN. I wonder if they're going to get deplatformed and demonetized.
Oh, no, they're not. Absolutely. I mean, that's one. I mean, Alex, there's fake news and there's fake news. I mean, there's the real fake news, which is what some people who go from strength to strength, who get all this, CNN and all these people, that's what they do. And then there's those of us who get accused of fake news, who do the sort of thing that we've just done on this program, which is get all this information and unpack it and try to work out what the facts are. Now, as I said, I mean, it's possible. I'm prepared to accept it's possible Smolenkov somehow got some information. It doesn't seem very likely. And when you look at the timeline, I mean, the story that's being set out now just doesn't add up. It doesn't make any kind of sense.
All right. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on the notifications bell to make sure you get notifications every time we push out a new video. Make sure to follow the Duran on iTunes and SoundCloud in audio format. The link is in the description box down below. And also, please donate to the Duran on PayPal, iTunes, and SoundCloud. The link is in the description box down below as well, and your donation really helps keep this channel up and running. And also go to the Duran shop, theduranshop.com. The link is in the description box down below. Pick up some awesome merchandise, polo shirts like the one Alexander is wearing, and I'm sure he also has some magic mug. Yes, some magic mugs right there.
I certainly do.
All right.
Mugs. And can I just say, since we're talking about the Kremlin and Moscow, I have a mug. This is my wife's favorite mug with the symbol of Moscow on it, which is the double-headed eagle with St. George slaying the dragon of untruth and fake news. We're talking about fake news there. And this is our own mug with a completely different double-headed eagle, which is the Duran mug, which points both to east and west. It's not connected to Russia. You can see it here on this marvelous polo shirt that I'm also wearing, as Alex correctly said. But we don't just sell merchandise in our shop. We sell books. We've got 2 books on Russiagate, which analyze a great deal of the story about Russiagate and explain how we got to this situation, what Russiagate was all about. We've got a book on Brexit. We're going to have to update all of these books because obviously we get more and more information all the time. And Alex and I have been talking about this, but you learn lots from reading those books, which are available, for only $4.99, less than the price of a cup of coffee in central London. So you can learn heaps about Russiagate from those books, heaps about Brexit from those books. You can refresh yourself while doing it by drinking tea, as I've been doing today. It's been a beautiful day today in London. I've been drinking oolong tea, Iron Goddess of Mercy tea from our own Duran mug, 15 ounces. Amazing mug to drink from, beautiful porcelain. And as Alex says, I've been wearing these marvelous, elegant, beautiful polo shirts. Can I say I took 2 of them with me on a trip around Wiltshire that I went on just recently for the weekend, another walking holiday with my wife, very generously extended to us by somebody who watches us on the Duran. I will just mention all of this. And these are enormously stylish shirts. All our merchandise is fantastic. The feedback is prodigious. Help the Duran, help yourself, buy these great things from our shop. Alex will tell you how.
The link is in the description box down below. Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.